excitement for Breath of the Wild 2 continues to be in flux, and as time goes on, Zelda fans all over the world wants to know more details when it comes to this heavily anticipated sequel. But one important, if not the most important piece of discussion when it comes to how the sequel can improve upon the first is the concept of dungeons to make them more traditional in a sense when it comes to past Zelda games. And while I did enjoy the fresh take that the Divine Beast had to offer along with certain shrines, I too share the sentiment that Breath of the Wild could do a lot better if you were to tackle traditional dungeons in a non-traditional sense. But with today's hype theory, we're going to explore the avenues of possibilities when it comes to how Breath of the Wild can tackle traditional dungeons while utilizing concepts of the past into the present and possibly the future of Hyrule when we look to the skies and the underground. What's up guys, it's HMK once again with another Zelda Theory. Breath of the Wild 2 is upon us supposedly in 2022, so let's get that hype renewed for the new. And if you're down with that, be sure to like, share, and most importantly subscribe to HMK. Let's dive directly into the noise. As a primer, a big portion of this theory relies on the notion that Breath of the Wild 2 is going to tackle multiple different points in time. That the collected idea among Zelda fans is that the Sky Islands actually take place at a previous point in Zelda's history, either that of around the time of Skyward Sword or a little after that. Because many agree that it's pretty blatant within the second trailer of Breath of the Wild 2 that Nintendo is trying to establish a contrast between two versions of Link in this game. The familiar Link from Breath of the Wild with the blue champion's tunic, and this new Link with his hair down and a weird green garb that so far only seems to exist in the skies. It's believed that this could be a past version of Link, which I believe that we inhibit their body as taking our soul from Breath of the Wild to the past, reliving the past as a present soul using the past's body as a conduit. Kinda like Assassin's Creed, but not really. Especially given how this past Link kinda looks like the Link on the mural for the Calamity Ganon. Anyways, going off the first trailer of Breath of the Wild 2, many believed that we're going to be tackling dungeons in the underground as we see from this one shot. And honestly, that would explain why traditional dungeons were absent in the first Breath of the Wild, because they were hidden under the ground. But then we come to the second Breath of the Wild 2 trailer in which we see these massive buildings up in the sky on certain islands in the distance. And that had many believing that those were the dungeons. But a person like me, I'm thinking if we're dealing with past, present, and future, why not both? And I had this thought process live on the fifth dimension, where there could be specific points within the overworld of Hyrule where Link utilizes his vertical phasing ability in order to tap into the past and jump through the skies of Hyrule in order to land on these islands that are absent from the skies when you're on the ground. That would explain why. Because they're in the past, and you can easily come back to the present by merely jumping off the islands and landing back on Hyrule. Think of it as a temporal phase shift. Anyways, I digress. It is in these past Sky Island segmented areas where Link would have to explore the skies and find these dungeons. However, in the past, they weren't really dungeons. They were more like temples, a place of peace and sacred offerings, because so far, aside from one friendly looking god-made mechanical enemy, the skies look like they don't hold that much of a threat or malice. I believe when you reach these temples in the sky, there will probably be people of the sky there, or monks, or at the very least, temple caretakers. And when reaching these dungeons, you're gonna have to go through a trial in order to open these temples. But once you do, you don't enter the dungeons or the temples there, because there's no problems in that temple or dungeon. There is no boss, there are no enemies. And that is because I believe once you open these temples in the past, they will become open in the future, in the present of Breath of the Wild 2. And then you will have to traverse back to the present on the land of Hyrule. And this is going along with the idea that over time, in those past 10,000 years plus 20,000 years, however long it was, those temples fell from the sky and were buried within the earth. So much so that they're so deep underground. And by utilizing the positioning of where they were in the sky, that's how you're going to locate them underground. And now that they're open, you realize that over time, over this grand space of years, and the fact that Ganondorf and his malice was underground all this time, the malice and the creatures of the underground have infested these temples and turned them into dungeons. And then that's when it's showtime and you're gonna have to complete the dungeons in that aspect. I honestly think that this will be a really cool approach and a good way to rejuvenate your interest in exploring this familiar land of Hyrule, both above and below the ground. It'll be a great way for those familiar with this land in order to use their positioning to their advantage, while at the same time not alienating those that didn't play Breath of the Wild and went straight into Breath of the Wild 2. But the functions of these dungeons when completed is still part of the mystery. But if we're going in line with the thought process that these dungeons in the past act as sacred places of prayer and worship to the gods and the Triforce supposedly, then cleansing these dungeons of all of the malice of all of the enemies, the creatures of the night and the underground, could possibly reactivate these temples as beacons to possibly give you clues to the next dungeon or reveal the true hidden position of the Triforce, which is something that Ganondorf would definitely want. That and or granting you a way to reach Hyrule Castle, which is now floating above the ground. Ocarina of Time, anyone? In any case, given the position of Hyrule Castle this time around in Breath of the Wild 2, I don't think that this game is going to be as open-ended in terms of how you want to tackle the dungeons in whatever order, when speaking specifically on the final dungeon. I feel that the essence of Breath of the Wild will still pervade in Breath of the Wild 2, in which you can tackle any dungeon in any order except for the last one, as you're gonna have to complete all of them in order to reach the last one. Which is completely fine in my book, but I want to know what you guys think on that specific matter, as it's still up in the air on what could be locked behind these dungeons, whether it be new items or specific power-ups that go into your new green arm. As the rewards for completing the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild 1 were really cool, the champion abilities, but they were completely optional in the grand scope of things. So we really gotta see if Nintendo is gonna go in one direction or the other when it comes to the necessity of these potential rewards in the dungeons. In any case, I feel that discovering these temples or dungeons in the Sky World and then doing so again in the underground will be a great way to establish the pacing of Breath of the Wild 2 while also integrating new ways to explore the map and granting you new gameplay options to traverse these different spaces. And when you think about it, this concept is slightly explored when it comes to Skyward Sword. And to me, it seems that Breath of the Wild 2 is trying to explore all of those concepts that couldn't make it a reality in Skyward Sword and literally bring them to new heights in Breath of the Wild 2. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you think about this theory in the comments below. Leave your theories and thoughts there. And while you're at it, be sure to like, share, and most importantly subscribe to HMK for more Zelda content every week going into E3 2022, baby. Until the next Zelda video, this has been HMK, and I'll check you guys later.